Dadperfectrevenge. I was lying in that hospital bed, 58 years old, weak from the stroke that nearly killed me 6 months ago, when I heard them whispering in the kitchen. My wife, Dorothy, and my son, Leonard. They thought I was asleep. They thought I couldn't hear them planning to steal everything I'd worked for and put me in some nursing home. They called me a washed-up old fool. They had no idea I was recording every single word. My name is Howard Mitchell, and this is how I discovered my own family was my worst enemy, and how I made them pay. The doctor said I was lucky to survive the stroke. Lucky. That's a funny word when you're lying there feeling like your brain got scrambled and your body doesn't work right anymore. Dorothy was so caring those first few weeks, bringing me tea, fluffing my pillows, handling all the bills and paperwork. "Don't worry about the boring stuff, honey," she'd say. "Just focus on getting better." I was a mechanical engineer for 32 years before I started my consulting firm. Built it from nothing into a $2.1 million business. Dorothy always said she was proud of me, proud of what we'd accomplished together. 28 years of marriage, I trusted her with everything. She handled the finances, managed our retirement accounts, dealt with all the legal stuff. I was the engineer, she was the people person. Perfect team, right? Wrong. 3 days after I came home from the rehabilitation center, still walking with a cane and slurring my words a little, I heard them in the kitchen. I was supposed to be napping, but the medication made me restless. Their voices carried down the hallway, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "The transfer to the Swiss account went through," Dorothy was saying. "That's $1.8 million moved safely offshore." "What about the consulting firm?" That was Leonard, my 32-year-old son, who hadn't held a steady job in 5 years. "Victor's handling the buyer. We should get another $2.1 million when the sale closes. Your father will." Never know what hit him. Victor, Dr. Victor Thompson, my neurologist. The man who'd been treating me, who I'd trusted with my recovery. The man who, I was now realizing, had been sleeping with my wife. I lay there in that bed, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might have another stroke. They were stealing everything. My life's work, my retirement, my dignity, all of it. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated me. See, Dorothy always thought I was just some simple engineer who didn't understand the complex world of finance. She had no idea about the patent royalties I'd been collecting for 15 years from 3 mechanical innovations I'd developed. Those royalties went into a separate account she never knew about. $2.5 million sitting in a private trust. I also had something else Dorothy didn't know about. In my consulting work, I'd helped design security systems for several major corporations. I knew exactly how to set up surveillance equipment that would be virtually invisible. The next morning, while Dorothy was at her book club, probably meeting with Victor, I got to work. My hands shook a little from the stroke, but my mind was crystal clear. I installed 3 tiny cameras in strategic locations around the house. The main one went inside an old clock on the mantle, aimed directly at the living room sofa, where Dorothy liked to take her private phone calls. I also accessed our shared family devices. Dorothy had set up all our phones and tablets to sync to the same cloud account years ago for convenience. That convenience was about to bite her in the rear end. For 2 weeks, I pretended to be the confused, helpless stroke victim they wanted me to be. I shuffled around the house, asked the same questions twice, pretended to be overwhelmed by simple paperwork. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence that would bury them. The cameras captured Dorothy and Victor together in my house, in my living room, kissing and planning my future. The recordings caught them discussing the cognitive decline evaluation Victor was preparing, a fraudulent medical report that would declare me mentally incompetent. But the worst part was Leonard, my own son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, put through college. He was right there with them, counting my money like I was already dead. "Once we get the guardianship order," Dorothy said in one recording, "we can move the rest of the assets and put him in Sunset Manor. They specialize in stroke patients who can't manage their own affairs." Sunset Manor, a nursing home 200 miles away, where I'd never see another familiar face. "How long before we can access everything?" Leonard asked, and I could hear the greed in his voice. "The moment the judge signs the order, we control it all. Your father will spend his final years drooling in some facility while we live the life we deserve." That hit me harder than the stroke ever did. My own son talking about me. Like I was already a vegetable. Like my life had no value except for the money it could provide him. I had to act fast. They were filing the guardianship petition that week. Once that went through, I'd lose all legal rights to my own life. I called my old friend Carl Peterson, who ran a small law practice specializing in elder law. "Carl," I said, "I need help, and it has to be completely confidential." When I showed Carl the recordings, his face went white. "Howard, this isn't just theft. This is conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse. They're looking at serious prison time." "Good," I said. "Let's give them exactly what they deserve." Carl worked fast. He filed a counter-petition, challenging Dorothy's guardianship request and presenting evidence of the financial fraud. But we kept it quiet, sealed from public view until the hearing. Dorothy and Leonard had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, I had to keep playing the role. Every morning, Dorothy would bring me breakfast in bed, asking how I was feeling if I remembered to take my pills. She was so convincing, so caring. If I hadn't heard those conversations, I would have believed she genuinely loved me. "The lawyer wants to meet with you tomorrow," she told me one morning, sitting on the edge of our bed. "He just needs to ask you a few questions about your condition." "What kind of questions?" I asked, making my voice sound confused and worried. "Nothing scary, honey. He just wants to make sure you're comfortable with me handling all the financial stuff. You know how complicated these things can be. Complicated, right?" What was complicated was how a woman could live with a man for 28 years, share his bed, raise his child, and plan to rob him blind the moment he became vulnerable. That afternoon, while Dorothy was out shopping, I made another discovery. I was going through our home office looking for more evidence when I found a folder hidden in her desk drawer, insurance policies, bank statements, and something that made my stomach turn. Brochures for Sunset Manor. She'd already toured the facility. There were notes in her handwriting. Private room, $8,000 per month. Memory care unit. Limited visiting hours. She'd calculated how long my money would last there. Apparently, I had about 12 years before they had run out of funds to keep me locked up. 12 years of my life, planned out like a business transaction. But the worst thing in that folder was a letter, half written in Dorothy's handwriting, addressed to Leonard. "Once your father is settled in the facility," it read, "Victor and I can finally be together openly. The house will be sold, and we'll move to the condo in Florida. You'll have your inheritance early, and we can all start fresh. Start fresh, like I was already dead." I photographed everything and sent it to Carl. The evidence was overwhelming now. Not just audio recordings, but documents, financial records, a paper trail that showed months of planning. The court date arrived faster than I expected. Dorothy had pushed for an emergency hearing, claiming I was deteriorating rapidly. She showed up in her best dress, playing the role of the devoted wife burdened with a sick husband. Leonard was there too, wearing a suit I'd bought him for Christmas, looking like the concerned son. Victor sat in the gallery, probably there to testify about my cognitive decline. They had their story all worked out. Poor Dorothy, struggling to care for her mentally compromised husband. Loving son Leonard, worried about his father's deteriorating condition. Respected Dr. Victor Thompson, ready to provide expert medical testimony about stroke-related dementia. I shuffled into the courtroom, leaning heavily on my cane, wearing my oldest clothes. I looked exactly like what they wanted the judge to see. A broken-down old man who couldn't take care of himself. Dorothy's lawyer stood up, all confidence and practiced sympathy. "Your Honor, this is a tragic case of a once brilliant man whose mind has been ravaged by stroke. My client, Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell, is here today seeking emergency guardianship to protect her husband from himself." He gestured toward me like I was a piece of evidence. "As you can see, Mr. Mitchell is clearly unable to manage his own affairs. Dr. Thompson will testify that the stroke has left him confused, disoriented, prone to paranoid delusions about his own family. Paranoid delusions." That was rich. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, "Mrs. Mitchell has discovered that her husband has been making erratic financial decisions, attempting to hide money, becoming suspicious of those closest to him. These are classic signs of post-stroke cognitive impairment." Dorothy dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The performance was flawless. "Your Honor," she said, standing up, "I've been married to Howard for 28 years. I know this man better than anyone. The Howard I married was sharp, decisive, trusting. This man sitting here today isn't the same person. He accuses me of stealing from him. He forgets conversations we've had. He gets confused about simple things like paying bills." She looked directly at me, and for just a second I saw something cold flash in her eyes. I love my husband, but I can't stand by and watch him destroy everything we've built together. He needs professional care, and I need the legal authority to provide it. That's when Judge Patricia Coleman, Carl had specifically requested her because she'd presided over similar elder abuse cases, held up her hand. Before we proceed with your medical testimony, counselor, I should inform the court that I've received some additional evidence in this matter. Dorothy's lawyer looked confused. Additional evidence, Your Honor? We've submitted all relevant medical reports and financial documents. This evidence, Judge Coleman said, reaching under her desk, was submitted by Mr. Mitchell himself. The judge held up a USB drive, audio and video recordings that I believe shed considerable light on Mr. Mitchell's true mental state and the motivations of those seeking to control his affairs. I watched Dorothy's face drain of color, her eyes locked onto that tiny USB drive like it was a loaded gun. Leonard shifted in his chair, suddenly looking nervous. In the gallery, Victor cleared his throat and looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, Dorothy's lawyer sputtered, we object. This is highly irregular. We haven't had a chance to review. Objection noted, Judge Coleman said calmly. But as this is a guardianship hearing, the court has broad discretion to consider any evidence relevant to the respondent's welfare. Officer, please play the audio file. The courtroom filled with the sound of Dorothy's voice, crystal clear. The transfer to the Swiss account went through. That's $1.8 million moved safely offshore. Then Leonard, what about the consulting firm? And Dorothy again? Victor's handling the buyer. We should get another $2.1 million when the sale closes. Your father will never know what hit him. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear Dorothy's sharp breathing, Leonard's chair creaking as he shifted nervously, Victor clearing his throat in the gallery. A few people in the courtroom gasped. Dorothy's lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, probably trying to figure out how to salvage this disaster, but the recording wasn't done. Once we get the guardianship order, came Dorothy's voice, we can move the rest of the assets and put them in Sunset Manor. They specialize in stroke patients who can't manage their own affairs. Leonard's voice, how long before we can access everything? The moment the judge signs the order, we control it all. Your father will spend his final years drooling in some facility while we live the life we deserve. Dorothy shot to her feet. That's taken out of context. We were just discussing hypothetical scenarios, trying to plan for his care. Ma'am, please sit down, Judge Coleman said firmly. The recording isn't finished. More voices filled the courtroom. Dorothy talking about the Florida condo, Leonard asking about his early inheritance, Victor discussing the medical evaluation he was prepared to falsify. Every damning word, every calculated betrayal played out for everyone to hear. When it finally ended, the courtroom was dead silent. Dorothy was white as a sheet, gripping the edge of the table. Leonard looked like he was going to be sick. Victor had his head in his hands. Judge Coleman looked at the three of them with disgust. Dr. Thompson, I see you're here. How convenient. I assume you're prepared to testify about Mr. Mitchell's cognitive decline. Victor looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. Your Honor, perhaps I should recuse myself from this case due to potential conflicts of interest. Indeed you should, the judge said coldly. In fact, I think all three of you should recuse yourselves from Mr. Mitchell's life permanently. She turned to me. Mr. Mitchell, would you please approach the bench? I stood up, and for the first time in months, I didn't need the cane. I'd been using it as a prop, part of the performance. Now I walk steady and strong to stand before the judge. Mr. Mitchell, she said, your surveillance operation was quite sophisticated for a man allegedly suffering from cognitive decline. Thank you, Your Honor. 32 years of engineering teaches you a few things about problem solving. She almost smiled. The court finds no evidence of mental incompetence. In fact, the evidence suggests exactly the opposite. Your assets will be immediately unfrozen, and I'm issuing a restraining order preventing any further unauthorized transfers. Then she looked at Dorothy, Leonard, and Victor. Bailiff, please take Mrs. Dorothy Mitchell, Leonard Mitchell, and Dr. Victor Thompson into custody pending investigation for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and perjury. The courtroom erupted. Dorothy was screaming that it was her money, that I was incompetent, that this was all a misunderstanding. Leonard just sat there in shock, watching his mother being handcuffed. Victor was already on his phone, probably calling his own lawyer. "This is impossible," Dorothy shrieked as the bailiff put handcuffs on her. "He's a sick old man. He can't do this to me." "Apparently he can," Judge Coleman said dryly. "And apparently he just did." As I walked out of that courtroom, Carl handed me another piece of paper. "The bank in Switzerland has agreed to freeze and return the $1.8 million. Apparently, they don't like being used for elder fraud." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Dorothy, Leonard, and Victor were all charged with multiple felonies. The local newspaper picked up the story. "Local doctor charged in elder abuse conspiracy" was the headline. My consulting firm's phones started ringing with clients who wanted to hire the engineer who'd outsmarted his own family. Dorothy's trial came first. Her lawyer tried every trick in the book, claiming the recordings were doctored, that I'd manipulated the evidence, that this was all revenge from a bitter, sick old man. But the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, email trails, the written notes about Sunset Manor, even surveillance footage from the facility showing Dorothy taking a tour and asking about memory care options. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Leonard's case was more complicated. His lawyer argued that he was just a victim of his mother's manipulation, that he was financially desperate and easily led astray. The prosecution painted him as an adult who made his own choices to defraud his father. In the end, the jury found him guilty but recommended leniency. Victor lost his medical license before his trial even started. The medical board doesn't take kindly to doctors who falsify cognitive evaluations to help steal their patients' money. He got 4 years in prison and had to pay $300,000 in damages. His medical career was over. Dorothy got 5 years. Leonard got 3 years with the possibility of parole in 18 months. When the judge read the sentences, Dorothy looked at me across the courtroom with pure hatred. No remorse, no apology. Just anger that her plan had failed. Leonard, though, he looked broken. As they led him away, he caught my eye and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Too little, too late, but at least he seemed to understand what he'd lost. Me? I took the recovered money plus my secret $2.5 million and did something Dorothy never saw coming. I established the Mitchell Foundation for Engineering Education. Every year, we give scholarships to young people who want to build things, create things, make the world better through engineering and technology. The first year, we gave out 15 scholarships. Students from small towns, kids whose families couldn't afford college, bright minds who just needed a chance. I meet with each scholarship recipient personally, and I tell them the same thing. Your knowledge and skills are your greatest assets. Never let anyone convince you they're worthless. I'm 59 now, fully recovered from the stroke, and living in a nice condo near the State University, where our scholarship recipients study. The place Dorothy and Victor had planned to enjoy together is now my home. Funny how things work out. I volunteer in the engineering lab 3 days a week, teaching students the hands-on skills they don't always get in textbooks. They call me Professor Mitchell, even though I was never actually a professor. These kids respect experience, value wisdom, see my age as an asset rather than a liability. Dorothy writes to me from prison sometimes. Her letters always follow the same pattern. She starts by apologizing, then gradually shifts to blaming me for overreacting, and finally demands that I help pay for her legal appeals. I don't respond. Carl handles all communication through the court system. Leonard wrote once, about 6 months into his sentence. His letter was different, genuinely remorseful, asking not for money, but for forgiveness. I'm still thinking about that one. People ask me if I'm bitter about what happened. The truth is, I'm not. Dorothy and Leonard did me a favor, actually. They freed me from a marriage built on lies and showed me what my son really thought of me. Now I'm surrounded by young minds who appreciate knowledge and experience, who see wisdom as something valuable rather than something to exploit. The stroke didn't make me weak. It made me careful. And careful men who know how to build things can build the most devastating traps of all. I learned something important. It's never too late to start over. Never too late to show people who you really are. When someone underestimates you because of your age or your health, that's not a weakness. That's your greatest advantage. They thought they were stealing from a broken-down old man. They had no idea they were stealing from an engineer. And engineers, we don't just solve problems. We solve them permanently. The foundation is thriving now. We've expanded to include internships at major engineering firms, mentorship programs, even a competition for young inventors. Last month, one of our scholarship recipients designed a new type of prosthetic hand that's cheaper to manufacture and more responsive than anything currently available. That's a legacy worth building. That's a legacy no one can ever steal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's getting even, getting smart, and getting justice. But more than that, it's taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and turning it into something that helps other people. Every morning, I wake up knowing that my life's work will continue long after I'm gone. Not through Dorothy or Leonard, but through the minds I help shape today. Young engineers who will build bridges, design medical devices, create technologies that make life better for everyone. That's what real wealth looks like. That's what true success means. And that's something worth living for. The people who think you're finished often forget that experience isn't weakness. It's a loaded weapon they never see coming. When life breaks you down, you have two choices. Let others build your grave, or use the pieces to build something better than what you had before.